All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to break down some trig. So if I go share screen. So we'll start off with number 17. If a ball is thrown at a 40-degree angle and it flies at 15 meters per second, 2 seconds, how far will it go horizontally? Okay, so what we're looking for effectively, man, all these kids showing up late. G-A-R-D-Y, you ain't got no alibi, you tardy. Yeah, you tardy. Woo. Did I ever tell you guys I used to be a cheerleader? Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we're going to go ahead and think about drawing this out. So we're going to have a 40-degree angle. We're going to be having our initial velocity of 15 meters per second. And it's going to be in the air for t equals 2 seconds. What's up?
Hello.
Hey, I'm teaching you here. Can I help you?
Oh, sorry. Chairs. Perfect. I like it. Thank you.
Have a nice day. I feel like someone just broke into the room and you weren't wearing clothes. It freaked me out for a second there. Glad you guys got to witness that. All right, so what we're going to effectively have here, and we are going to, bingo. So set this so it pins my video. So you guys unfortunately got to see me. Oh God, it's once again, Marcus just garbage, isn't it, guys? Okay, so we've got our angle, it's 40 degrees. We got 15 meters per second. Our hypotenuse is that 15 meters per second. What we then need to go ahead and solve for is, specifically if we're going vertical, it's going to be the opposite. If we're going horizontal, we're going to use the adjacent. Okay, so then remember our good old SOHCAHTOA. So that right there is going to be our adjacent, cosine equals our adjacent of our hypotenuse. So the horizontal velocity is going to be equal to where we're going to have effectively the cosine of the angle equals the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And specifically here, the angle is going to be 40 degrees. The hypotenuse is going to be 15. So we're going to multiply both sides by 15. And that leaves us with our horizontal velocity equals 15 times the cosine of 40 degrees. Now from there, we're going to go ahead and enter that into our horizontal distance formula. So we're going to take 15 times 2 seconds, or this velocity times 2 seconds that we sum up here, and that's going to how far it's going to have gone horizontally. Now, if we want to figure out the vertical distance, we'll do it without gravity first, and we'll do it with gravity. So we're going to take our vertical velocity, which is going to be equal to the sine of 40 degrees equals the opposite over our hypotenuse, which once again is 15. So we're going to multiply both sides by 15. And so we're going to be left with 15 times the sine of 40 degrees equals our vertical velocity. So vertical distance without gravity is going to be x equals our initial velocity times time. So it'll be that number there, and the t will be the number 2. That's our distance. Now, whenever we want to figure out with gravity, we're going to have the formula of x equals our initial velocity times time and we're going to be minus, because gravity is pulling us down in this example, 1/2 of our acceleration of gravity times time squared. So that's going to be 2 squared. That's going to be 9.81, and that's going to be multiplied by 1/2, and then 2 times the velocity that we have solved above. Does that help clean things up for you, John? Sorry, Luke, my apologies.
It did. Yeah, I was getting ready to say that was like that, but yes, that helped. So.
Okay, cool. So what is going to be any other review questions you guys want to do, or I'm just going to go ahead and just do some more lecturing off slides? Nothing? Fair enough. Okay. Let's go ahead and talk some more about rotational physics. And as you grow to understand that, it should make a lot of the other things that we were talking about in this class seem, I'd hope, a little bit easier, but I could be wrong. I reserve the right to be wrong. I do it quite frequently. All right. So we left off talking about angular inertia. So effectively, objects rotating are going to stay rotating or stay at rest unless acted upon. And it's only going to do so because torque has been exerted upon it. Okay. Now, when it comes to the angular law of acceleration, we have our net torque cause our angular acceleration. And that's going to be always related to the magnitude of the torque, in the direction the torque is producing, and inversely proportional to the body's moment of inertia. Okay, what does that mean? That means if we are trying to rotate a carousel, so if it's absolutely massive, you can push that thing as hard as you want, but because of the body's moment of inertia of that carousel, you might not be able to get it to rotate whatsoever. Now, whereas if we have something like a top that you can just turn your hands real fast and spin, it's going to go ahead and rapidly accelerate in rotational velocity because A, we're producing a decent amount of torque, but we've got such a small amount of inertia that it's easily overcome and we're able to accelerate rapidly. Does that make sense? So the formula here, guys, is going to be our torque equals our inertia. So remember, that's our mass multiplied by our radius squared, then multiplied by the lowercase alpha, and that effectively is acceleration whenever we're looking at rotation. So when it comes to angular law of reaction, every angular action, there's an equal and opposite angular reaction. When one object exerts a torque on the other, the second body exerts a reaction torque that is equal and opposite in direction of the first one. So kind of that same type of basic idea with linear physics. Whenever you push against something, that something pushes back against you. And it's always going to be equal to how much you happen to be doing. So an easy example of the angular law of action is if you ever try to rotate something or spin something whenever you happen to be on a kind of a slippery surface, you're going to feel it's turn you. And actually, a real easy one, and maybe some of you guys got to experience this summer, is swimming, which is when you're in the water, you're naturally actually rotating the water a little bit as you go. But as you push the water, you also rotate yourself inside of the media, because the torques that you produce are also reflected back upon you. Now, we then have centripetal force and centrifugal force. Centripetal force is the force directed towards the center of rotation. So if you have an object and it's spinning, the centripetal force is going to be the force that's pulling it into the center. So that would be what's observed by the actual object, effectively, that is up against the wall. So how many of you guys have ever been to an amusement park that have sometimes like cyclotrons or otherwise? They're effectively the rides that rotate at a really high speed where you get pinned up against the wall. What's going on there is when you're up against that wall, you're feeling that centripetal force. So that's the wall pushing back on you. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. Nice. So from there, now notice guys, the mass of the object multiplied by the velocity squared divided by its radius. So the further out you are, the less effectively you're going to feel. The faster you're spinning, the more you're going to feel. Now, centrifugal force is what's going on pulling, that's what you're putting on the wall, aka the force directed away from the center. You pulling yourself backwards. Now, where in sport can you think of where you're going to be producing both centrifugal force and centripetal force?
Would it be like disc or shot put?
Awesome, Zach. Throwing a discus, throwing the hammer, any type of any throwing motion where you obviously are putting some rotation, there's always going to be some centripetal and centrifugal force. The key is the degree of which is obviously a lot bigger when you're throwing a discus or you're throwing a hammer, because there's a lot more weight to it. And that's why, you know, as the athlete, you have to lean to counterbalance it. Otherwise, it's going to throw you out of balance and, you know, make you effectively fall over. So any questions over the rotation side? And we'll touch on the math here later, but I'm just not trying to, shall we say, overwhelm you guys with that too much right now. Unless you guys want to do a couple math examples, then we can go ahead and do that. Okay, fair enough. Give me one moment, and I'm going to go ahead and pull up our next happy bit of slides. But in the interim, I'm only going to say this once. You are going to have effectively 60 seconds to push the correct button. And this is just my own fun way to figure out how many people are actually here and listening and not just kind of messing around in the background. So what I want you guys to do is on, you know, the whole polling thing, I want you to go ahead and just click the button, go faster. So just go ahead and click the button, go faster. Okay. All right, if you don't mind, Sarah, just put up in the chat, what is your last name? So I've got that. Thank you. All right, guys, congratulations. All of you have gotten 2 extra credit points because I'm the teacher and I can do whatever I want. No, actually, that's incorrect. But I wanted to incentivize you guys in your ability to actually show up and pay attention in class. So congratulations. You just got points for simply showing up and paying attention. The things that I like to incentivize. So keep doing what you're doing, showing up and paying attention. All right, so let's see what we got here. Got all that cleared out, and let me go ahead, make sure I've got, yes. So obviously we've been talking about your sports skills that you guys are gonna be breaking down as a group. Now, the big key here is to give you guys really a lot more context on what we're looking for as to how we're setting things up and how we're gonna be breaking things down. I apologize for making you guys kind of jump ahead, so to speak, specifically when it came to the goniometer lab and breaking down your movement. This is hopefully gonna give you guys more context between talking through chapters 7 and 8. So when we're trying to break down a sports skill, the first thing we need to figure out is really, as simple as it sounds, what's the objectives of the skill? So what are we really trying to accomplish? The simple fact there is if we know what we're trying to accomplish, we can start to figure out effectively how wide a variability we can have in skill or how narrow we need to have those skills being performed. So in the chat, or go ahead and unmute yourself, guys, what type of sports skill can you guys think of that is highly, highly specific? As in, you don't really have a lot of room for variability in how you perform it. Now, gymnastics is an entire sport. I do appreciate that idea, but the skills, there's a number of them obviously you're gonna do, and you can have a lot of variety in how you've been doing it. Nice. Well, I mean, to be fair, in archery, I've seen examples of people that shoot with their legs. Tennis is still an entire sport. So think of a skill. Gotcha, Jared. There's a lot of different ways you can dive. You can swan dive, you can jackknife, you can not even put your arms up. Pitching in baseball, you can throw overhand, you can throw sidearm, you can have the submarine. And one of the craziest motions I've ever seen, the funny thing is I can't even do it with my throwing arm, is there was a guy I played baseball against in high school that this would be his set position. And then he would literally just step and throw like that. It was one of the weirdest things you've ever seen. Shooting in basketball, we can shoot granny, we can do a layup, we can do a dunk, we can do a free throw, we can do a, yeah, you can throw it single-handedly. So see guys, if we're looking at the objectives of the skill, you've got a wide amount of variety for a lot of things you're doing. The key is, once again, you need to be narrow in the skill that we're really looking at within the sport. So what can you guys think would be a really narrow version of a skill inside of a sport? Back tuck, volleyball spike, not bad guys, not bad. You can probably have a little bit of variation on it. Is your hand, are you in a fist? Are you in an open palm? But a lot of those things are going to come pretty much similar in a spike. Running and track, I mean, to be fair, really good technique is going to be very similar. But if you look at a lot of, say, humans running around on campus, you see some very interesting choices with running technique. With the back tuck, there's a little bit of variation on how you can start and effectively your foot positioning. But yes, there's a lot of things that are very, very simple of what you're trying to do. In the back tuck, you're trying to land on your feet, not on your face, though it does happen on occasion. So all we're trying to do is just figure out like what are we really trying to accomplish. And from there, different types of characteristics. Thrusting and fencing. Yeah, that could be it. Depends on, what hand your athlete is. Well, still, it's going to be very similar. And a couple other things. Now, first, we've got repetitive skills. So things they're going to be able to do over and over again. And cardiovascular sports, very repetitive. Then we have non-repetitive, something that's going to be effectively a one-off. So what can you guys think of would be a repetitive skill in a sport that then leads to a non-repetitive skill? Okay, so Dominique, you're only going to take that one free throw, but what do you do before you shoot? Well, not really before you shoot a free throw, because that's not really a thing. But what's the thing that you typically do in basketball before you take a shot, if you've had the ball before the moment you took a shot? Because remember, we're going from a repetitive to a non-repetitive skill. Bingo. Dribbling, going up to shooting a basketball. Dribbling before you take a shot in soccer. Does that make sense, guys? Where you're going to have repetitive skills and non-repetitive skills, and quite frequently, your repetitive skills lead up to your non-repetitive. Now, from there, we have to ask ourselves, is this predictable or unpredictable? So, Olympic lifting, track and field, all of those things are very predictable. We should, in theory, have pretty much the exact same situation every single time we do something. We don't have to worry about any type of change. Now, your ball sports, your combat sports, all of those are going to be unpredictable, which is you have an opponent that is trying to obviously make sure that you're not successful in one way, shape, or another. So the game is going to change as we play it, and we have to be able to effectively make modifications on the fly. Now, it's not to be said that there aren't mistakes that happen in your predictable sports, and you have to make changes very rapidly to make sure that you're still going to be successful, but unpredictable is more of the nature of the sport. So with the difference between predictable and unpredictable, is there any sport that right now you guys are kind of on the fence about which one it would be? No? You guys feel like that one's pretty straightforward and pretty easy to do?
What about tennis?
Awesome. Okay. So great question, because we're going to have different components. What's predictable about tennis?
It's gonna go back and forth like the ball.
The ball will go back and forth. In theory, the only thing that's 100% predictable about tennis is the fact that the ball is going to be served, just like volleyball. It's going to be served from a certain location, and then the ball has to hit the ground within another certain location. Now, that location is relatively broad, so you have some options of where that ball is actually going to land and how it's going to play. So your certain parts are predictable in that you're going to be within certain ranges. Now, as far as does your opponent put topspin on the ball? Do they put backspin on the ball? Do they put the ball in the corners? Are you going to have to run back and forth? All of those are going to be more of the unpredictable. So you have to be ready to obviously move, hit the ball appropriately, and make sure you get it where it should be. What are some other factors in tennis that effectively are going to be unpredictable? Now, that's going to be more of a predictable thing of doubles or singles. You usually know that day if you're going to go and play with other people, if you're going to be on your own, but not a bad idea there, John. What is going to be, think about the environment, guys. What's an environmental change that can really throw, yes, great job, Rowland, wind. And same thing, Caitlin, where that's can be unpredictable. You can have, I mean, not that you're playing tennis in the rain and snow and hail and blah, 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 but you know, wind can obviously really modify how the game is going to be played. As far as outside of that, the surfaces can be different that you're playing on in tennis. Clay does not bounce as much as playing on the hard surface, so the speed of the game is a little bit different and the height of the bounces. But At the same time, you're going to know typically what surface you're going to be playing on. So you can still have certain components that are predictable, certain components that are unpredictable. Okay, now that's not a bad point there, John, which is it's not so much that it's more unpredictable because of having more options. The key is think of it along the lines of how much can we really prepare for and what do we need to prepare for? So the key is if you're teaching your athlete how to serve, that's predictable. They're going to have the ball, they're going to be behind the line, and they have to hit the ball within these certain confines. So the serve is a pretty predictable skill. And obviously it's a non-repetitive one. So like, okay, let's get them set and make sure they know what they're doing so they're going to be successful there. But as far as, yes, how hard is their opponent going to return or serve the ball to them? What's the location that ball is going to be coming in at? Like I said, how will the spin affect the play of the ball? All of those things are things that need to be practiced and trained. So it's, if you think about, baseball has a number of predictable things in the basic rules of how you play it, but there's a number of things that are unpredictable. Like, where does the pitcher put the ball? Now, it's safe to say when they're pitching, the ball is probably going to be somewhere around the strike zone. They're probably not going to throw a pitch that's literally halfway between first base and the plate, unless they really want to scare the hell out of the batter and everybody else, as maybe they try to like gun a ball into the visiting team's or the home team's dugout because reasons. But it's typically going to be within a certain area. Now, once the ball gets hit, that is effectively, you can start to predict it within certain ranges when you have enough information on an athlete. And that's actually why they do a lot of sport data tracking to figure out like, where does this athlete typically tend to hit the ball? Where do they typically tend to play at? So that way you can at least try to have some information to help you with how you're playing, but it's still not going to be 100% predictable. So is every sport either predictable? Haley, I would figure the best way to think about it, and right now we're talking about skills. So there's certain skills that are there's certain sports that are going to have both predictable and unpredictable skills. When it comes to pitching a baseball, it's relatively predictable. They're going to throw it in relatively similar motions, but where they're going to put that ball, that is the part that's unpredictable. Now, when it comes to something like MMA, the skills, your opponent, what they're going to do, it's all effectively unpredictable. Like, yes, you can have information on their typical fighting style, their success in the past, what are the techniques that they tended to use, but that's not going to give you like 100% perfect information as to like, okay, I need to be ready for this, I need to be ready for that. Instead, it's, you have to have your basic plan, but then be ready to modify it rapidly depending on obviously what occurs. So then our goal should be to look at the best performances of the given skill, because it's going to give you an idea of how fast it should be performed. What's the general organization, the positions that people are going to be performing it in. So we have an idea of what is going to be a good performance of it. Now, we're going to see the mechanics that are undoubtable, as in like, here are the basic things we need to do. But then we're also going to start to get an idea of where can we have some variety in performance. So, obviously I am a bit of a fan of lifting, and specifically, I've already shown you guys some of the Olympic lifters. You can see videos of, different top flight Olympic lifters, and they all are going to do certain things in common when they're doing the snatch or the clean and jerk, but there's going to be variations depending on their own limb lengths, depending on their own strengths and their own weaknesses, their mobility and so forth. All of that is going to cause varieties in effectively their technique and how they're going to perform the motion. So you're looking for where you find commonalities, but then understanding where can there be differences. So what can you guys think of would be an example from a sport where there's a basic way that we should all perform this skill in common, but here's where you're going to see the variety on the choices people are going to make. Yeah. You know, you can be at that true 90-90, you can be at the 45, you can be, sorry, forget how long the arm is, you can be sidearm, be at a 45, be at 90, or you can be even a more overhead position. All of which are going to be ways that you can throw a ball and throw it relatively hard and throw it relatively well. However, different individuals are going to have those different effects. Now, the key at the same time, when an athlete throws the ball, they're going to be stepping in the direction they're trying to throw. They're going to be turning through their core and otherwise to utilize the rest of their body. They're not going to step forward with their right arm and try to throw. That's just not going to happen. So we know there's certain things that we're always going to have in common whenever we're throwing the ball with one arm compared to the other. But then we're going to have certain other things that are always going to be different, thanks to, once again, differences in the mobility, shoulder structure, how someone's trained to do that movement. Yeah, different styles and how people are going to do fencing. Was it fencing? There's saber, and then what's the third form of? Oh, sorry. There's epee, saber, and there's one more. If you guys ever get a chance, watching a fencing tournament is wild. It's fun. Foil. Thank you, Luke. Yeah, and all those are going to be performed differently. A number of things in common, aka you're trying to essentially score a point against your opponent and not get hit, but that's different in how you approach it each time. So this is what you guys are working with your skills. We're dividing it into 4 phases. We have the preparation or preparatory movement and essentially the mental set. From there, we're going to have the wind up. Then we're going to do our force producing, and then we're going to have our follow through recovery. So, for example, if we're looking at the skill of swinging a golf club, preparatory movement and mental set is going to be them setting up. Wind up is going to be their backswing. Force producing movement is going to be swinging through and getting contact with the ball. And then from there, the follow through or recovery is when they're coming through on the other side. And we're obviously going to move a certain number of degrees in each of those positions. So we have our initial set. So I've got the angle of my shoulders, my elbows, my wrists, my knees, my hips, my ankles, my back. And from there, I'm going to change the angles in each of these to come to this position, change the angles back to come forward, and then change the angles again as I'm following through. So we're making sure we're breaking them down into each of those individual phases. Now, it's going to be obviously specific to whatever we're doing in the movement. Now, repetitive skills only are going to do the preparatory movement at the very beginning, but then after that, they're just going to be going effectively from the wind up, force producing, and then the follow through. So wind up, I think for a lot of you guys should probably be pretty straightforward and pretty easy. The force producing, that's going to be also pretty easy because that's where you're trying to get yourself up to speed. That's where you're generating the force to go ahead and get and accomplish whatever skill you're looking for. Your follow through is effectively right after you did the movement. Now, like anything else, a lot of different skills you have to follow through, and if you don't do it, you're going to be more likely to injure yourself. So this would be an athlete that would try to throw a ball as hard as they can and then try to stop their arm immediately as opposed to just following and letting the arm go through, where they're doing a lot of eccentric damage on the rotator cuff musculature. And so we want to go ahead and divide it, or each of these phases themselves, into those key elements. So what are those things that we always need to see? What are we going to always be looking for? And then think about, of those key elements, then prioritize which one goes first compared to another, because this is also going to help us with trying to decrease our injury risk. So it's what are the key elements in each of those phases to make sure that you don't hurt yourself or your athlete doesn't injure themselves. So they're going to be able to do the repetition more frequently. So if we understand why we're doing it in that order, this is going to allow us to go ahead and teach it and give appropriate cues. So for example, if we're going to have someone perform a movement like the back squat, what is going to be the key element that they need to be performing when they're doing the movement? That should be true in pretty much every single phase of the movement. If we want to decrease risk of injury, what should be one of those key things we should always have them do?
Kind of keeping their chest up.
Yeah, keeping their back neutral to extended, you know, having bingo in having appropriate posture. Like we can have a little variety when we're squatting of how close and how wide our arms are. We can have a little bit of variety of how close and how wide our feet are apart. We do want to make sure that our knees are never trying to kiss and buckle in. That's definitely going to be true. But we're going to have, you know, a certain amount of variety of where our body position is thanks to anthropometrics. But we definitely know is your back should look like it's sponsored by the letter C. Like you should be in a good upright position and to make sure that they're not going to hurt themselves. So when you're breaking down all of your skills, you have to ask yourself, what are the things that we need to see in order to not just be successful, but also to decrease our risk of injury? So what can you guys think of as far as, let's take something simple like a tackle in football. What are some choices people could make that they'd be successful, but they're going to massively increase the risk of injury? Lowering their head, absolutely, John, absolutely. What else? Using the shoulder could be something that could eventually give them some issues depending on how they're applying it. Trying to tackle with their arm wide as opposed to being a little bit narrower, not just lowering their head, but just driving their head directly into their opponent. You know, it turns out brain injuries are a thing and you should probably try to avoid it. Trying to tackle with a rounded spine as opposed to a flat back is going to be another one. So, you know, we're really trying to think about what are we trying to teach that's going to not just keep our athlete, or not just allow our athlete to be successful, but to also make sure they're going to be healthy. Because you can do a number of things and be successful. Like you can deadlift with the rounded back, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be healthy over the super long term, especially if you get up to lifting some pretty high loads. So any questions through here of what's going on? And if you guys can go ahead and look through, are you able to see all the participants, all the people that are here right now? So in your group, go ahead and try to talk through those basic 4 phases. And you guys can do that by when you chat, you have the drop down, and then you can send it to specific individuals. So try to send it to your group members. And obviously if there's more than one group member, things are going to get a little bit more involved, but you guys should be able to kind of chat back and forth and effectively try to break down each of those 4 phases and where you're going to be seeing each of those whenever you guys are doing your movement skill. And when you guys are ready, I want you to have just one person go ahead and effectively type out and then put into the chat effectively how you guys are going to break down those 4 phases for your movement. So once again, you have your preparation, your windup, your force producing, excuse me, and your follow through. I'll give you guys about 5-6 minutes. Give you guys about 5 minutes. Be right back. I'm just gonna grab some water. It's okay, Catherine. All right, guys, let's go ahead and see what you guys came up with. So volleyball serve and the shoulder prep would be shoulder abduction. Okay. So the key is that horizontal abduction? Is that, are we here? Are we here? So I need to clean that up a little bit. Wind up be shoulder external rotation. Sounds good. Force producing would be shoulder internal rotation. Yeah, and I'll follow through would be shoulder extension and probably also horizontal adduction and on down. I'm not sure if you're supposed to do it looking at the whole body or one joint. Okay, good. Haley, the goal is you're going to each be breaking down your own joint. So whatever joint you're doing for the study, each person will have their own. Kicking a soccer ball, getting square to the ball. Yeah, wind up pulling the leg back, force producing, kicking the ball, follow through, legs move forward. Yes, absolutely. So that a lot of those degree changes are going to be happening at the hip, but we're also going to see that at the knee. We're going to see that in the leg. And obviously, you're just talking about the kicking leg, what's going on with the plant leg. Make sure we break that down also. Deadlift, setting up over the bar, shins close. Yes, wind up phase would be grabbing the bar, having a slight bend in your knees, rolling the shoulder back, creating good posture. You'd probably also be dropping your hips. So you'd be increasing the angle of both the flexion of both the ankle, or sorry, all three of the ankle, the knee, and the hip joint. Yeah, picking the bar up, so we're straightening everything out. Follow through phrase would be lowering the bar back, and the same thing, we're gonna be going through all that flexion again. Snatch, clean group, man, you guys are gonna have a lot to break down there. Yeah, good. And you're gonna see the double bend, because there's a first and second pull for all Olympic lifts. which is an interesting little animal you guys will have to touch on later. Yeah, wind-up phase, knee extension, no, that would be probably flexion. The key is you actually have effectively two, well, I guess you technically have two wind-up phases because you're going to be pulling yourself under the bar, and so you're going to be bending again after you're force producing lifting. So I mean, that'd be technically part of the follow through, but then you go into another round of force producing. So. Okay, not bad, not bad. Okay, guys, not bad for your initial breakdown. Maybe you're going to have to, like I said, not just figure out what's going on with these joint movements, but you guys can at least think about it in a qualitative sense, but we're also going to quantify what those degree changes are going to be in each of those. Does that make sense to you guys? Awesome. Good. All right, so let's talk about how we're going to identify and then correct errors in our sporting skills. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is just watch the entire skill. You know, you can obviously, for your performances, we're going to be trying to film it. Now you want to film to where you're going to be able to see as much of it as possible, and you're going to want to do at least 3 different trials with coming from 3 different angles. So for your guys' sports skill, I want to see a video of the skill being performed straight in front of you, the skill being performed in profile, and then preferably being shot from above or potentially below, depending on the skill you're doing. Most likely it's going to be above. You know, when in doubt, you guys can go ahead and use the many different locations on campus where someone can be one effective story above the other filming the skill. For example, you could use Powell, like someone could be standing on that walkway and then someone's down in the bottom, like kind of that common area where there's the, I should say like kind of the chapel thing in between it and Wallace, if you guys know what I'm talking about. Or you guys could go to the rec center and someone's could be filming from up on the walking track and the person could be down on the basketball courts for the filming. So we're going to be able to see what's going on from a variety of angles. Now, obviously, when you're filming, make sure that we're going to be safe. So not going to have you filming someone pitching a baseball from 10 feet away to them, in front of them. That sounds like a good way for you to lose some teeth. Try to make sure that we're as distracted as little as possible. Trying to be quiet. So let's try not to make comments or, I don't know, make jokes when people are trying to do their best to perform the movement. We're going to try to do it with the typical speed and equipment. So we're not trying to go slower so we can try to make it look better. We're not going to use lighter equipment or heavier equipment that might cause us to make more mistakes or to make it skill easier. We want to know what it really looks like when they perform it. Now, we want to figure that someone that's done the skill more frequently, they're going to be more consistent with their movement. The person that hasn't done as much are going to be more likely to make errors. And once again, film 3 different trials from 3 different angles. For your project, you're going to have both a master, so high-level skill person performing it, and you're going to have a novice performing the skill. So we want to be able to see some of those differences when we look at the videos from the different angles of skill differences. Use, I think it's Giphy.com. It's a website that allows you to make short video or make video clips into a GIF, so it'll repeat. And you can purposely crop the start and stop time, so that way you can literally put your master next to your novice skill and get an idea when we see it on repeat of where the errors are being made, where there's some inconsistencies in the movement. So we're going to be looking for other cues than just visual. We're going to be looking for auditory cues. We're obviously going to be looking for the result. You can have, you know, less than great mechanics and still hit the strike zone, still be able to bowl a strike, still be able to, you know, be effective. And then obviously, you know, how did they feel doing it? Certain skills are always going to feel awkward when you do them. Certain positions people aren't going to like, and that's normal. Other times they should feel, you know, comfortable. They should feel like this is a natural technique for their body type and how they're doing it. So what can you guys think of would be an example of an auditory cue that you're going to pick up on that's going to show you success in a skill or a lack of success?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, good. What's going to be like an auditory cue of a skill was successful or unsuccessful? So, Cassandra brings up a good point, which is, yeah, the triple jump and hearing a loud thud because they literally effectively hit hard and try to land soft. Yes, absolutely, John. Where a lot of sports, when you hit the ball, may it be in baseball, may it be in volleyball, like when you really get good contact, or in the same thing with tennis, the ball makes a different noise. So when you don't hit it dead on, or you don't hit it obviously very hard, it makes a different sound. Where you're like, especially with like baseball, where you can hear when they really hit the ball off the handle. You hear that dong, and it's like, oh, yeah. Hear the ball say, hearing the umpire say ball or strike. Yeah, that's a pretty good auditory cue if it was in the right spot. That's fair. And same thing, if you didn't hear a bat hitting a baseball, it's safe to say that, and you could at least hear him swing, then I guess you did something right. For me, one that comes up in when you're working with cheerleading is when you hear usually that's a sign something went wrong if you're not looking at a stunt. Or you hear a gasp, or you hear, obviously other types of noises if things have gone poorly. So, we're going to have auditory cues of when things are going well and also when things are not going so well. Now, as far as participants' experience, what can you guys think of of a skill or a position in sport where it's like, this is uncomfortable, as in like, I don't like this body position or otherwise. And if they say they don't like the body position, they're usually probably doing it right. Backpedaling, that can be one. What else? Horse stance in martial arts. Don't know what that means, but that doesn't sound very comfortable. Oh, very low stance. Yeah, there you go. Good job. Yeah, no, that's can be a really great one where that's how you know someone's doing things correctly is if they are comfortable, they're probably not low enough. They're probably not really trying to get that center of gravity down low. Absolutely. Good job there, Luke. We can have the same thing, calling again from cheerleading, but seeing folks when they're doing shoulder stands. Another can be, at least in when it comes to strength training and some of the work I've done with athletes, but whenever you're looking at a movement like a good morning, or you're looking at a movement like a Romanian deadlift, if they're like, that feels awful, like it just tears up my hamstrings and gets into my low back. It's like, we're probably doing it right. If you're like, oh, this is comfortable, it's like, no, you're not doing it right. And actually, one of the best ones for participants' experience when it comes to, they're doing it right or they're doing it wrong, squat depth. If somebody says they like squatting and they genuinely mean it, there's either you should be slightly afraid of that person because they are no stranger to pain, or they don't squat heavy. And if they do squat heavy, they don't squat low. The sumo deadlift, yeah, the start position is definitely going to feel really awkward initially. And so is the deadlift in general. When you really start to teach that initially to most folks, like it feels awkward to have to sit down like that and try to pull using a lot of hip and low back. So nice job, guys. Nice job. So when you're going to be doing your filming, you want to make sure you're picking a location where we've got good lighting and make sure that you can do it safely in that given space. I know it sounds simple, but just keep that in mind. One big thing to keep in mind is background. So, I'm standing up against a white background, and I don't have a great tan, but I have a little bit of a tan, and I'm wearing a blue shirt, and actually blue shorts because I really thought that one through today. So you're always going to see a decent contrast between me and the background. Whereas, let's say there's a black background and you're wearing black leggings, which has actually happened in the class. One of the gals who they did a video of, it looked like she did the movement pretty well, but you couldn't really see it very well because she was wearing black against the black background. So just try to make sure that you're having effectively a good contrast between whatever is going to be the background and what your subject is wearing. Same thing when it comes to clothing. We want to make sure the clothing is going to be tight enough you can see what's going on with the movement where you need to see it. Now, I'm not saying we need to be out there in spandex, but making sure that we can really see the changes of the angles in the hips and otherwise. You know, most of your gym shorts and otherwise are going to give you all the information. Your t-shirt is going to be relatively good. Now, you just want to go wearing a super baggy pair of pants, or like a super loose fitting t-shirt or a sweatshirt, because we're not going to be able to really see those slighter deviations in the bend of the elbow, the movement of the shoulder, because they're just going to be lost inside of the clothing. Now, from there, we want to analyze each of those phases and think about those key elements we talked about earlier. Now, there's two different ways you can do it. You can start with the results and work backwards, or you can start with the beginning and effectively work through what's going on. Now, for you guys, we're having you guys start at the beginning, work your way forward. Some sports skills, you'd probably just start with the end result, and if it's where it needs to be, you can just kind of work backwards and figure out where's the point where they went wrong. But if you're really doing the long and appropriate development of your athlete, you're going to start at the beginning and work your way forward, because you want to make sure they're always starting off with correct technique so that there isn't any type of deviation or mistake that they're making early on that's going to, they could compensate for it later, but we'd prefer to be efficient with doing everything correctly the entire time if we can help it. So we've already talked about the joys of throwing. So making sure that they're starting with an appropriate set, they're doing an appropriate windup where they're staying balanced, but they are really getting themselves effectively as wound up as possible. They're producing that force in an organized way that's going to be allowing them to be successful, and then they're going to safely follow through so they're not going to risk their injury. So we're going to use what we've talked about with mechanics or biomechanics so far, which is, are we doing this in an appropriate way where we can both apply and receive the force? So, aka, are we doing this in a good balanced position? Is our base of support extended in the direction it should be, meaning that we are going to have our body lined up so that we can appropriately produce the force and receive it? Or do we have our feet too wide apart or too narrow? Now, this can be an issue when it comes to nearly any sport where, you want to have you don't want to really have your feet together, but if you have them too far apart, we're wasting force because we're applying that force laterally as opposed to vertically, which is going to allow us to move faster. Are we standing up too high? So great example that you guys, or Luke, you brought up with that horse stance of, are we literally up too high or should we be down lower? Because that's really where we're going to be more successful. And then when it comes to the athlete's COG is center of gravity, are we effectively too far to one side so it's easy to topple over? We need to keep our balance in the middle. So a good example of that can be if you ever watch people doing judo, wrestling, or otherwise, where they can have their weight too far into their opponent is then going to be able to throw them and otherwise by using their own effective off-balance location of their own center of gravity to wherever they want them to be. So they want to be leaning on their opponent, or they want to have a little bit of weight on their opponent, but not their entire weight, because that's an easy thing for them to take advantage of. Now, from there, what are we going to correct? Is it going to be everything all at once? No, for the love of God. So first thing we want to do is start off with the major errors. Is their back rounded? Are they twisting their spine in a weird way? Are they moving their shoulder in an unnatural position? Are they lining up their knee in an unsafe position? We want to focus on the things that are the major errors that are likely to harm them. And then we want to start to work with the minor errors, the little tweaks we can do to help enhance their performance with time. So Now, here's a big thing that can really, really allow you to fail quickly or allow you to be successful. And Caitlin, I'm probably going to lean on you a little bit, just because I've seen you before, obviously, with the joys of having spirit. Okay. When it comes to coaching, and specifically when it's appropriate to give feedback and how you're going to go ahead and go about doing it. So, Caitlin, you mind unmuting yourself? Or are you away from keyboard? Which is another great way to.
I'm here.
Awesome. Okay, so when you were cheering, what can you think of be a good example of someone giving you way too much information, or your flyer too much information, so that they couldn't do enough with it to really help themselves out, because they were just essentially, they call it paralysis by analysis, just too many things going on.
I'm a little confused. I'm sorry. Like, what are you asking? Sorry.
That's okay. I'm asking, what's an example that you can recall where the coaching you received was too much all at once? So you guys, it was for your athlete to really apply, because, or yourself, because you're like, hold on, how am I supposed to think about these 8 things while I'm doing a skill that takes less than a second to do?
Definitely. Okay? When it comes to stunting, like someone telling you do this, but while they're also telling the flyer to do this, I don't know. You just get all confused. And
Yeah, no, I mean, that's.
And if you think you're doing it right, that's another issue.
Yeah, you have to be able to take the the feedback in a way that's going to be useful, and that's something. Thank you, Caitlin. That a lot of folks can forget, which is, and that's the big thing with teaching. In fact, what I'm trying to do with you guys, I need to make sure that I am saying this information to you in a way that you can hear it and understand it. So what I think is the way that I should say this, that you should understand it, is my opinion, which can be wrong because it's my opinion. All we're looking for here is the end result, which is, are you learning this material? Do you understand this material? And if the way that I'm teaching it doesn't cause that to occur, there is quite the possibility that it's my fault and I need to figure out a better way to explain it to you. And so my wife and I were having a conversation the other night, and effectively, if you haven't noticed, guys, I never have a lack of volume in my voice. Like, it's just kind of the way I am. Fun random fact, no nonsense. My mom was literally tested once for like how loud you can be as a human, in a legitimate research study they were doing at Washington University in St. Louis. And she literally tested outside of the range of typical human volume. So yeah, I come from literally very loud people. My wife comes from very quiet people. And on occasion, so let's just say the other night, because welcome to the pandemic, I was playing a video game with my little sister and my dad late at night, and I was a little upset at the video game and was maybe discussing my upsetness with the screen. And I unfortunately woke my wife up, and this is my fault. And she then was telling me that you were screaming at the screen and it woke me up, to which that immediately kind of stops my listening to that part of the conversation, which is my own flaw, okay? Because I wasn't screaming at the screen. My wife has never actually heard me scream, because that's, once again, it's incredibly loud. Like, I know that from the few times I actually have yelled at full volume, that most people like kind of wince in pain and pull back. And I was like, if I was screaming, I'd be waking the neighbors. Like, I have a propensity for noise. But the key is, she perceived it as that was me screaming. And so because of the language that we're using and how she was explaining it to me of how she felt, that's not how I proceed myself because I know I wasn't screaming. Because boy, howdy, that hurts my own ears whenever I yell full volume. So we needed to make sure that we talked to each other in a way that we both understood what we were talking about. Now, if she would have said, "You're being loud and it woke me up," that's 100% accurate. That doesn't bother me whatsoever. But, screaming is not a quiet thing. And I was not screaming because, once again, I know what a scream is and I was really holding back. But I was obviously being louder than I should. Does that make sense, guys? When you're trying to talk to somebody, when you're trying to coach, when you're trying to teach, it's not about saying how you understand it or saying exactly how you can teach it. It's important to make sure that you're saying it in a way that they can understand it. Awesome. So, and first and foremost, always prioritize your athlete's safety, making sure that the first decisions we're making, the first things we're really trying to coach is what are the things that are going to decrease risk of injury. Then let's worry about increasing performance. Because if your athlete's injured, even if you're cynical and you don't like the people, if you're injured, you can't play your sport. So that makes you effectively unable to improve your skills, much less get any better. So we want to keep them safe, even if you don't care about them, just so they can practice more and improve for you. And if you do care about them, which you should hopefully, then you're going to make sure they're going to stay safer and healthier longer than they would have otherwise. So this is just a last little piece for you guys of setting up the wonderful video camera. I love this because this is back whenever you had to actually use cameras. Now, I do have a GoPro in the lab and then a camcorder in the lab that you guys can both kind of check out and utilize for your recording your sports skill if you guys want to do so. Just go ahead and shoot me an email and then I'll make sure that you guys are able to pick it up. Otherwise, feel free to use your cell phones. Lord knows the cameras on a lot of the cell phones are better now than obviously the camcorders that I remember when I was growing up. So, make sure that you're doing what you can. Obviously, you don't necessarily need to mount it, but you definitely want to make sure you're as steady as possible when you're recording. We don't want to have it kind of on earthquake vision, and that you are going to make sure you're getting the information. As far as the date and time on the camera, I find that hilarious because that is a throwback, and I couldn't force myself to remove that because that's just too funny. But I mean, aside from that, it's probably the things that you guys have already been doing for years of videoing things that you did or your friends did, that it's a skill that you guys have far developed. So now you're just going to use it. But then, like I said, making it into a GIF so we can see the repeat of it, that's going to be something that really makes it essentially tell a better tale for us whenever you guys are going to upload your presentations at the end of the semester and we're going to be able to look at them. So with that being said, guys, we have not just reviewed completely for your exam, which is what you're going to be doing effectively by Tuesday of next week, but we've managed to work ourselves pretty healthily ahead. So any questions, comments, concerns before you guys head out for the day? Or you guys can just drop out of the meeting. That's fine. Not the class. Stay in the class. I like you guys. I want you guys to do well. But yeah, if you guys otherwise, go ahead and have yourselves a great day. Thanks for coming out.